According to legend, the Goatman is a terrifying half-man, half-goat hybrid. Like most legends, there are several variations of the stories. Some say that this creature roams the forests of Maryland, wielding an axe, and if you're unfortunate enough to cross its path, you will most certainly be hacked into pieces. Some stories say that the Goatman is a shapeshifter that can take on human form and mimic voices. Whatever the case may be, an encounter with the Goatman is never a good thing. Today we look at two terrifying stories of encounters with this creature. Rather, if these stories are true or not is for you to decide. Let us begin. Number 2. This happened 2 Fridays before New Year's Eve. I was at home with my friend Samantha, a few hours after school ended, when my dad called me to let me know that he wasn't going to be coming home that night. There was going to be a really shitty storm, and he said that he would rather stay at his friend's house with a few coworkers, other than drive 2 hours. My dad is a construction worker. He works at different locations for every new project, and this one was far. Mom came home not long after, drenched in rain. She talked to Sam for a bit, before telling us that she would be upstairs taking a shower and filling out some paperwork from the office. Shit was thrown into the air around 8 p.m. when Sam and I heard knocking on the door. It was already weird, because who the fuck would be out in this weather? It was pouring rain, and the streets looked like actual streams of piss. I went down to the door, dragging Sam with me, only to be greeted by nothing. We were looking out the door for a little under 5 seconds when we heard knocking again. Now this is when the shit that was thrown into the air reached and hit the fan. Sam and I instantly pissed ourselves when we realized that someone was knocking on my back door. My back door being the door leading into the backyard. We quietly went upstairs to my mom's room, finding her asleep, not even changed out of her work clothes. I woke her up immediately and told her someone was in our backyard. This obviously caused alarm, and seeing her so freaked Sam and I out even more. This might not sound as scary to you, but being home without my dad in the house was scary enough on its own, with us trailing not even 2 feet behind her. She then pulled out her rolling pin. Before we could reach the door, the knocking stopped. Mom reached over and pulled the curtain back. All Sammy and Mom saw was pitch black, but I swear I saw something a few feet away from the door. Maybe I was the only one who saw it because I was facing in its direction. It was tall as fuck. 7 feet, maybe taller. That's all I could tell you, because that's all I saw of it. It probably was just one of the tree branches. It's really windy out, Mom suggested. I could tell that Sammy wasn't too sure, and I knew damn well it wasn't no tree branch. But why freak the rest of them out? I know now that I should have told them so we could have left, but I kept quiet for their sake. About an hour after that, Mom decided to go to the department store down the street to pick up some dinner, and left both of us at home. It was only 5 minutes later when we heard knocking again. I quickly felt uneasy. "It could be your mom," Sammy said. I went down to the door and asked who it was. The following 5 seconds of silence were the longest 5 seconds of my life. "It's me." It was Mom, but at the same time I felt like it wasn't. Looking back now, I realized her voice sounded like it was lacking all human characteristics. It wasn't playful, nor was it frustrated at how long we were keeping her in the rain. It sounded like it didn't even know what emotions were. I opened the door without unlocking the chain. I was greeted by my mom, so I let her in, and she came in without any bags. She sat down on the couch for a few minutes, looking around. She was so fucked up. She seemed glitchy, like her actions weren't flowing smoothly. "Mom? Are you okay? You don't seem right." Her eyes looked at me before the rest of her face turned. "It was just a long walk. Cold, outside, raining." She kept listing words and phrases that made little sense. I was getting more uneasy by the second, but I think Sam was just glad that we weren't home alone anymore. The scariest thing that happened that night happened during one of Mom's ramblings. Sammy had asked her what we were having for dinner, and then she started listing more foods that we didn't have. Halfway through her rant, I received a text from Mom. "Do you girls want lasagna? Ask Sammy what she wants, and take your time deciding. It's so warm in here." My heart instantly dropped. Mom was sitting right in front of me, talking about fish fingers. Sam and whoever was pretending to be my mother directed their attention to me. I was panting, and according to Sam, all color had drained from my face. "Who is it?" Mom asked. Wrong number." I quickly flashed a smile. "You look tired, Mom. Do you want to go to bed? Sam and I will make dinner." "I think I just need a bath." We nodded, and she stood up and made her way to the stairs. She was at the bottom of the stairs when I pulled out my phone to take a photo. I looked down at it for 1 second to cancel the 20% remaining notification. When I looked back up, Mom was already at the top step. I can't stress enough, the time in which I looked at my phone and looked back up, it would be impossible for someone to walk 13 steps. I ran back to Sammy and waited until we both heard water in the bathroom running. "Sam, Mom texted me." "What? When that thing was talking to us, my mom texted me." She started freaking out and thinking of reasons. "Maybe she meant to send you that text earlier, but it only just delivered now." That seemed valid. Apple is always glitchy like that, but we decided to call her anyway, just to make sure. Just as the phone started ringing, someone knocked on the door. We went to go see who it was. Sammy was about to open it, but I put my hand in front of her. I was so terrified at this point that I was in tears. Sammy stared at me in confusion. "Hey, Mom," I said into the phone. I was shaking as soon as Sammy heard me say that. She looked like she was about to throw up. "Open the door, it's freezing outside." I sighed in relief and threw open the door. Mom was standing there with the phone pressed against her ear and shopping bags around her feet. We quickly explained what was happening, and it took Mom 2 minutes of hearing the story for her to climb up the stairs and walk towards the bathroom. She literally kicked open the door to find the tub almost filled to the rim. The window was also open, and the fly screen was torn. The rest of the night consisted of us trying to get over what happened. We ended up sleeping together in Mom's room, and Dad came home early the next morning. I only started researching a few days ago, and I found out that this was something called the Goatman. I also came across Anansi's Goatman story, which shares similar aspects, and it's also a lot more terrifying than the encounter that I had. Number 1. It was 2007, and I was with a couple of friends camping. I was 16 at the time, and I was hanging out with other 16 to 18-year-olds on this fun camping trip out in the woods behind one of my friend's house. We picked a spot in the clearing where it would be kinda like a little party kind of site, although I don't do drugs or even smoke weed or any of that. I grew up with that going on all around me, so I tried my best to avoid it. But nobody brought weed or anything along, I don't think. So we all hung out in this clearing with 3 different tents set up, with a little fire pit in the middle. We had planned on spending 4 to 5 days out there, It was summer vacation, so we didn't have any school, and I think it was early August. Anyway, we all decided to hang out in the clearing, roasting marshmallows, and everyone but me having beers. I sat around making s'mores, and the sun was just beginning to set. We were all having a really good time. At around 7 o'clock or so, we all heard something moving in the bushes nearby. Someone threw an empty beer bottle at the bushes. We heard the smash, and watched something climb out of the bushes and lumber back into the trees. We all thought it was just some psycho person, but everyone got a little bit nervous. Later that night, I was asleep in the tent with 3 other people. The only person I knew was my friend Paul, who invited me along. I remember everything being silent, and then a sort of popping sound by the fire. We all sat up. Crawling out, we could hear other people in the other tents saying, "What the fuck was that?" Paul unzipped the tent, and we all crawled out. The fire, which we had put out an hour or 2 ago, was now roaring with flames. We put it out and thought maybe someone poured gasoline all over the fire and lit a match or lighter and started the fire again. We never heard gas being poured or a match being struck. We also didn't hear anyone running away. It was at this point that we noticed an awful smell. I had kind of a stuffy nose, so I really couldn't make it out, and it could have been a skunk, but Paul said to one of the other guys that it was like rotten meat, and we hadn't smelled it earlier or since. Some of the other guys began holding their shirts up to their noses because of the putrid smell. We were all on edge. But I guess we all agreed, fuck it, let's just stay here. Nobody brought any guns to defend ourselves, but one guy, who was about 18, said he had a pocket knife. On our second day there, nothing happened until it became night again. At 4 a.m., we were all fast asleep and awoken by noises behind our tent. We started to get out when Paul said, "Shut the fuck up for a minute." We all sat in silence, listening to the noises that sounded like voices, but I couldn't make them out. The voices seemed to be coming closer to us, and we quietly climbed out of the tent. The voices still approaching our camp, the other 2 guys in our tent crept to the other tents and woke up the other people, telling them to get out here at once. All 13 of us stood quietly, listening to the voices get closer and louder, at the point where they had gotten directly behind our tent. We all heard the voices stop, but an eerie humming noise was coming from the trees all around us. One of the guys, I think named Ben, who was 17 or 18, walked to about 10 feet from the tree line where the voices were coming from. He said, "Oi, who's there?" And we quietly waited for a response. We heard nothing except distant crickets. He walked back to us, and right then we heard the voices moving away. But I swear, I heard one of the voices repeat what Ben had asked. "Oi, who's there?" But it didn't sound like Ben moving away. It was almost like it was trying to mimic what he sounded like. I could hear the voice sort of crackly and jumpy repeating those words as it moved off into the distance. We all got back to our tents but didn't sleep. The next day, someone had left to their house to grab something. They came back a little later with a potato gun, saying that they would shoot the fuck out of that thing bothering our campsite. Around 7 p.m., not really partying, just huddling around the fire, a girl, just one of 2, stands up, practically pissing herself, and we find out what's wrong. Here's one of the similarities I found with a well-known Goatman story. She said that last night, while we were listening to the voices, there had been another person with us. There was 13 of us now, but she insisted that there had been a 14th person. Reading Anessi's Goatman story and connecting that experience later made my butt clench. We started to get nervous again, and Ben told us he was going to run back to his house. He and the potato gun guy were neighbors, and he was going to get his father to come out with a real gun and wait. Someone went with him, and Paul and I were just sitting talking to each other about how we could leave early if this shit got too chaotic, which it was starting to get to now. We were in the middle of talking about how we should pack up when we saw Ben standing in the woods. It was clearly him with his blue hoodie and jeans. He was looking straight at us from about 40 feet away, but we didn't know what the fuck he was doing. The person who went with him wasn't standing next to him. It was just him, standing alone, watching us. It was a 25-minute walk back to his house, but he couldn't have been back in 5 minutes. Everyone got really uncomfortable and people started yelling, "Hey Ben, what are you doing?" But he just kept watching us. We watched as he seemed to sink back into the trees. By now, people were scared out of their minds, and I was too. Why was Ben being such a prick and just staring at us and not doing anything? We decided to pile into one tent and wait. A short while later, the real Ben turned up with his dad, and the other guy that went with him. His dad was holding a hunting rifle. Ben told him what happened with the voices, and his father walked that way into the trees to look around. He said that he felt that eyes were watching him from every direction. Paul then told Ben's dad that we just saw another Ben standing in the woods, staring at us. Ben's dad walked over there too to look around. He came back and said that he would stay with us with his gun, but he said that he would control it because if we got drunk and started shooting the gun around, we would all kill ourselves. That night, he slept in Ben's tent. On our third night there, things got really fucking creepy. We quietly listened for it being somewhere nearby. Paul had a funny look in his eyes and started sweating. He later told me that while we were sitting around, he saw a strange figure moving through the woods, moving its arms around in a strange, jumpy motion. Around 2 a.m., we were all going to get ready for bed, and then we heard it. It was saying something in a high-pitched voice. It sounded like it was saying, "Oi, who's there?" Completely mimicking what Ben had said the night before. Ben's dad tried to pinpoint where the voice was coming from and fired a shot into the trees. The gunshot was loud as fuck. Right after, we could hear a creepy chanting in a male voice. I was scared. Paul was scared. Everyone was. The chanting sounded like a deep voice chanting. It wasn't multiple people. Underneath the chanting, we could hear something like mumbling noises. Again, another shot was fired, but I saw what Ben's dad was shooting at. It was a figure crouched low by some bushes. It looked like it was hit directly, but the figure did not move. Instead, it stood up, sort of hunched over, and moved back into the forest. We raced back to our tents, and I could hear crying and moaning coming from behind our tent. All 4 of us in the tent were getting scared, and then I could smell a strong vinegar sort of smell. It was very powerful. Then I noticed what looked like fingertips moving along the tent wall and to the door, and moved down to the zipper and grabbed the part that you used to open. Paul then dove for the zipper and held it down to whoever or whatever was trying to pull it. Paul and one other guy in the tent started yelling, "Who the fuck is out there?" And then after a minute, we could hear a scratching noise as this thing took off into the darkness. We decided to say, fuck the 4th and 5th day. Let's get the fuck out of here in the morning. The scariest experience of that night was at 3:45 a.m. I had to take a piss. Since what had happened just occurred not long ago, I decided that I wasn't getting out of the tent, and maybe I could stick my bird out of the small zipper opening, but then I pictured whatever was out there biting or ripping off my thing, so I decided to open up the tent, slither outside just slightly, and piss to the side of the door. As soon as I was finished, I noticed someone by the furthest tent. I grabbed my flashlight beside my pillow and turned it on and shined it towards the person. It looked like Paul. His back was facing me, hunched over by the tent. but Paul was right next to me sleeping. I crawled back inside and kept my light shined on the other Paul. I whispered, "Paul, wake up." And the moment he did, I looked outside and the other Paul stood up and turned and was now facing towards me and staring at me. I dove back into my tent and leapt under my sleeping bag, and I huddled there awake as I explained to Paul what I had just seen. I guess at one point in the night, I was facing the other way and was freaking out when one of the other guys in the tent said that he woke up, eyes still half closed. As he rolled over, he could see the other Paul looking through part of the tent flap that didn't close. He thought that it was Paul coming to wake them up, but realized the real Paul was asleep right beside him. The next morning, we packed up as fast as we could and left. Hey guys, Unit 522 here, and I want to thank you very much for watching my video. I would appreciate it very much if you would share, like, and comment. And if you're new to this channel, become one with the Unity by hitting the subscribe button. If you have a scary story or experience that you want featured on this channel, you can always send it to my email or post it on the Free Horror Stories subreddit. The links for those can be found in the description below. If you would like to help out this channel even more, consider a PayPal donation. And for more updates, be sure to follow me on Twitter. There's nothing wrong with a little darkness in your life, as long as you never forget there's always a reason to be afraid.